Hi everybody, it's Professor Michalsen. This lecture is for criminology, about research methods in criminology. For those of you who've taken research methods or statistics before, some of this is going to be a little bit of a rehash, but it's important to know how those subjects mesh in with the topic of criminology. For those of you who haven't taken it, if you do decide to be justice studies majors, you will be required to take both research methods and statistics, so this is a good primer for you. This lecture is going to go along with the PowerPoint that's on the course document section of Blackboard, so go ahead and follow along. I won't be covering absolutely everything because you've already done your reading, and some of the stuff on the PowerPoint is self-explanatory, but you know, you can use it as a companion. So we talked already about how most or half of this class is going to be focused on theories and how criminologists use theories to structure the way that they approach thinking about crime. Methodology is important because whenever you hear anything about crime at all, it comes from data, and you need to learn how to be critical about the methods by which people collect that data. So did they just ask their friends about crime, or were they more careful and systematic about it? So when we talk about methodology, we talk about how people collect data and how they analyze those data to come to conclusions that then they can frame using theory. So today we'll be talking about methodology. And what I'd like you to do, I've put up on Blackboard a discussion board that allows you to play around a little bit with thinking about what topic interests you, and this is how a researcher would do it. What's a topic that interests you? And then what would be a theoretical perspective? Granted, we haven't talked about those yet, but you know, make something up. How do you frame the world? The same way that we talked about weight loss. How do you think about where crime comes from, or whatever it is that you know, whatever topic you come up with? And then lastly, how would you study it if you could? You know, I don't know. You got a big grant. How would you study that that particular phenomenon? So you can go ahead on Blackboard if you'd like, and write about what you would do if you were the boss, the methodological boss. There's good research and there's bad research, and then there's research that's in between. Three very important concepts that I'd like you to keep in mind, and the book goes into these concepts, but I want to make sure that you have an illustration of them, are validity, reliability, and triangulation. Validity really is the question of, are you measuring what you say you're measuring? And I'll give you a little story that can illustrate a certain type of validity. When I was interviewing formerly incarcerated mothers about their relationships with their children, one of the things that I was interested in was whether or not they had reunified with their children. To me, that meant that they had gone through the child welfare system. Children that they had lost when they had gone to incarceration had then been returned to them through this legal process, a lengthy legal process by which they then received back custody of their children. So I remember I was in a shelter. It was nighttime. I had been at work all day, and then I went to this shelter and I interviewed this woman at a domestic violence shelter, and I asked her a very simple question. Frankly, I knew the answer was no, but I asked her, have you reunified with your children? And she said, yeah, absolutely I have. We have Thanksgiving together every year. And at that moment I thought to myself, uh-oh, we have a problem with validity. Because what I thought I was asking her was not what she thought that she was being asked, so that she wasn't answering the question that I was asking her, which was a problem, frankly, of mine, that I hadn't made myself clear. And also, how was I going to compare the answers that I had gotten from other people to her answer? Were my findings valid? So, validity is, are you measuring what you think you're measuring? Reliability is the question of, if you were to do this study again, or if somebody else were to do this study again, would they get the same results? Are the results reliable from time to time? Yeah, that's reliability. Then triangulation. The issue of triangulation, really, really good research, comes at a problem from different perspectives. from different methodologies. So for example, if we wanted to know about drug use in a particular community, one of the ways that we could do it would be to approach it from a methodology of asking police officers about arrests for drug use. But then we could also use a methodology where we ask people, how often have you used drugs in the past month? And then lastly, we could take a look at hospital records, for example, and we could see how many people came in to the emergency room with drugs in their system. I use 3 because triangulation assumes 3. It doesn't need to be 3. It can be more, it can be fewer. It can't just be 1. But coming at an issue from multiple methodologies and seeing if you get the same results. So for example, if arrests give a certain bit of information about how much drug use there is, does self-report, asking people how much drugs they use, does that give us the same results or something different? And then hospital visits, for example, does that give us something even different from that, or does it confirm what we found in the other 2 places? Now, when we talk about crime data, the methodology that is used really most widely in the United States is the UCR, the Uniform Crime Reports. And your book goes into a lot of detail about this, so I won't talk about it a lot. But I'd like to make sure that you understand 2 things. Number 1, it's an absolutely incredible feat. The fact that the FBI compiles all this data, has been compiling all this data for so long, since the 30s, from many thousands of police departments, is absolutely amazing. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is that it's not exactly a measure of crime. Even though it's called the Uniform Crime Reports, and even though news stations will call the data that they give out measures of crime, it's only measuring arrests. So if you think about, I'd like you to sort of filter through the different things in your brain. What are the things that would be missing if we were only covering arrests? What about crimes that people don't get arrested for? Murder does a pretty good job of covering murder, because when there's a body, and somebody's usually missing, though homeless people and prostitutes generally might not be found quite as often as other people. But still, we feel pretty good about it being a measure of murder. But white-collar crimes, for example, not only are white-collar crimes not recorded by the UCR, because it's only a certain number of crimes, but if it were, it would only be arrests, and people don't get arrested for white-collar crime nearly at the rate that they commit white-collar crime. So be critical about that. Now, the NIBRS, National Incident-Based Reporting System, is the sort of the government's attempt to upgrade the UCR. It still hasn't been implemented. It was supposed to be implemented many different times over the course of the years, and it hasn't been implemented. It's a fabulous plan to increase the number of crimes about which data are collected, more information about what happened, more information about victims, about offenders, all of these different things. The problem is that it's been defunded over and over and over again, and they haven't been able to end up improving the UCR in that way. Now, the NCVS, remember what I said about triangulation, coming at data from multiple positions to see if you get the same picture. The NCVS is the National Crime Victims Survey. What that does is it doesn't go through police officers at all. It goes into people go into people's homes, researchers go into people's homes, and ask them whether or not they've been victimized. As you might imagine, there's way more crime that comes up in the NCVS than comes up in the UCR. People, for example, domestic violence and sexual assault, which are don't show up on the UCR very often at all. I mean, they show up, but they show up way more on the NCVS. Think about it. Somebody who's been sexually assaulted is actually really unlikely to go to the police. They might be worried that they wouldn't be treated well by the police, or that they would be ridiculed, or that they would be questioned about their own personal habits, for example, or they might be afraid of the offender. Most sexual assaults happen not by strangers, by people you know, and so they might be afraid of retaliation. They also might depend on that person for housing or for money, so they might be unwilling to talk about it, so they don't necessarily go to the police. They might love the person and not want the person to be incarcerated, for example. It's very complicated. But when somebody comes to their home and says, listen, this is totally anonymous, have you been sexually assaulted in the past X amount of time, people are far more likely to be truthful about it. Those are ways that the government measures crime. There are many other ways that researchers, usually affiliated with academic institutions, so your professors, myself, other professors at universities, are doing research where they're interviewing people, where they're doing experiments with people, they're evaluating programs. For example, there's a new program out of Hawaii called Project Hope that's been evaluated over and over and over again and shown to be really quite effective, where people are incarcerated for very short amounts of time if they violate their parole, and it actually helps with recidivism quite a lot, and people aren't going into incarceration for long periods of time. So many different methods by which people are researching crime that are not associated with the government. And as I said, there'll be people within university settings or within independent research settings. The Vera Institute of Justice, for example, does a lot of research on crime and justice. If you're interested, their website is vera.org. And they do a ton of very interesting studies. Program evaluation, as I said, is a big part of criminological research. There's also a lot of jobs in program evaluation, so I would recommend taking a look at the links that are up on the PowerPoint discussion board. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is ethical issues in criminology, criminological research. There's a section in the book where they talk about ethics. After a number of different lapses in using ethics in criminological research, some pretty awful ones, such as Zimbardo. I've put up a link to a movie about Zimbardo studies, if you're interested, that made people worried. They put together safeguards that make sure that people are being ethical when they're studying, when they're doing any research with human subjects. So, for example, there are a set of protected populations, people about whom it's very difficult to get permission to do research. Prisoners are in that category, pregnant women are in that category, children are in that category, people with developmental disabilities are in that category. So what researchers have to show is that the benefits of the study outweigh the risks of the study. And this is not just criminology, this is across the board, any research that's done on human subjects in a university setting or anybody who gets federal funding. So, and it's not only whom we study, but it's also what we do with them. So if I wanted to study how you as students reacted to pain, and I decided to hit you over the head until you passed out, I wouldn't get permission to do that study. The risks to, I don't know, your head would probably be considered to outweigh the benefits of finding out that information. So the last thing that I want to say is finding research studies is relatively easy, and I have a how-to sheet up in course documents. So take a quick look at that, how to find peer-reviewed journal articles document that's in course documents, and see if you can find some studies on something that you're interested in. I'll put up a discussion board on Blackboard that will allow you to talk about what you found. All right? So keep reading, keep doing your reading, keep keep posting on the discussion boards, and I'll see you next time.